I stole my pen. Oh, I always do. Always do. All right, let's call this meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. Could I get a motion to approve the agenda, please?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Sorry. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Let us move on to residents' comments and questions. I'm going to assume that most people are here for the 2017 improvement project. Does anybody have anything they'd like to discuss prior to or instead of that? I'm sensing no. We are on to reports, which we have none. Let's move on to the public hearing. Could I get a motion to open the public hearing, please?
I'll make a motion to open the public hearing.
Second.
There's a motion to open the public hearing. All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries. The public hearing is open. Let's move on to Mr. Dan Boyum, 6.1 Improvement Project 2017.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Once again, I'm Dan Boyum, the city engineer, and we're here to talk about the public hearing for our improvement project on various downtown streets. The items that I'll cover tonight, and I'll try to run through these items and then usually open it up to the public for questions, and then I can go back and forth on some of the slides if there's certain slides you want to see. But we'll review the proposed improvements. Then we'll discuss the opinion of probable costs. We'll also review the preliminary assessment role, the schedule. Then, as I mentioned, get feedback from the public. And then once the hearing is closed, and the council will kind of discuss the project and decide whether they want to proceed, with the project, and if there's any changes to the project they'd want us to incorporate. That little picture to the right is just some of the various project streets on the project. We need to fix the remaining downtown streets. The city started fixing the various streets in downtown Carver with the MCS Interceptor project. Then in 2012, we did the 4th Street project, and then in 2015, the Oak and 5th and 6th Street project. And so those have these are the remaining streets in the downtown. The improvements are part of the city's capital improvement plan, and part of the process that we go through is we do a walking tour with residents. Here's a picture of the tour that we made last summer or spring. And the city also did a survey on the 3rd Street Bridge to get feedback from the public on what they felt would be some options. The council then reviewed the feedback from these tours and surveys, and one of the big issues being discussed at the time was the 3rd Street Bridge. And so the council did look through various options related to that bridge and then asked us to study the items that are in the report. The proposed improvements in general are reconstructing the existing streets and placing new Yeah. See, we had that in general up there. Replacing the new streets with curb and gutter, asphalt, and drain tile. There's a lot of springs in this area, and so the drain tile will be an option for property owners to connect to, also with sumps. Also, new sidewalk at existing locations and some extensions of that sidewalk, especially at Hickory from Ash along 3rd Street. We're also planning to pave existing gravel alleys, and now that's a new thing that the city hasn't done in the past on some of their downtown streets. And so some of the reasons staff and council discussed doing that was for access for maintenance equipment, especially with some of the utilities in the alleys. They're difficult right now with existing gravel. Also, there's erosion that occurs along that existing gravel and kind of spreads out into the road. So getting a bituminous base on that alley will help to reduce that and maybe make it a little more cleaner look at the alleys. And also, as maintenance equipment tries to get into the alleys, they have over the years, there's growth that is encroaching on the alleys, and so the city would want to try to maintain that existing width. So those are some of the alley comments that we can talk about further later. Streetscape improvements along Broadway. Excuse me. Some of those including bump outs at the intersections, both at 3rd and Broadway as well as 4th and Broadway. Street lights being extended, similar to what you have on your 2 blocks of downtown right now, with trees, decorative walk, etc. Here's just a picture of 3rd Street by the bridge. So speaking of 3rd Street Bridge, the proposed improvements, there's 2 concepts that we'll talk about this evening with the public. Concept A is the view that's shown on the screen at this time. In general, with the 3rd Street Bridge, it's a historic bridge, and similar to the other 2 bridges that we had in Carver at 4th Street and Main Street, there's a process that you have to go through if you're going to replace a bridge. And with some of the funding issues in the last few years at the state legislature, there hasn't been funding available. And so the council, in discussing that this summer, they looked at, well, what's something that we can do at this time, knowing some of those issues. And so concept A is reflecting that discussion of closing the bridge to vehicles and putting in turnarounds while still maintaining pedestrian access. We're showing here in the slide, a walk or a trail that will connect between those cul-de-sacs. What we see in talking with our structural engineers is that by taking the vehicle weight off the bridge, by making some improvements with the drainage that would happen when you put curb and gutter on these streets, you are going to get a lot longer life to the bridge. What they are saying is this concept A is approximately like 2 times the amount of life as what you get when we talk about concept B. And it's mainly because if something ever happens, and I'll get into it with concept B, if something ever happens to the bridge, we've got these various wing walls that are separating. You could do some work, as long as you're not driving vehicles over the road, you could do some work on, if they tipped over, you'd be able to do some work and you're not kind of affecting the traveling public. So that's some of the reasons why this option gives you just a longer life. It does still allow the city to make some decisions in the future with bridge options by just kind of spending a minimum amount of money at this time on concept A.
Hey, Dan, could I just interrupt you, and if you could just give a brief synopsis of the SHPO and the historic aspect of the bridge and the process and the funding and timing.
Sure. Yeah, so it's typically a 2-year process that the city needs to go through.
Because it's a historic bridge.
Right. So what happens as soon as you start digging to remove the bridge, it triggers the Army Corps of Engineer permit, which then, because it's a historic bridge, puts us into dealing with the State Historic Preservation Office. And so the city had to do that with the 4th Street Bridge. That took longer than 2 years. But the Main Street Bridge, the 4th Street Bridge, it was around 2 years. But at that time, there was funding available for bridges. So you don't get funding unless you prepare a plan, and then you have it sitting there at the state and reviewed. And then you have to also go through this process with SHPO, which takes a year and a half. So it seems like the fastest you could do something is in 2 years. And then right now there's not as much funding at the state, and so you might be sitting there and not getting funded when you.
So it would take at least approximately 2 years, and we may or may not get funding for that?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
As we looked with Concept A, there is some effects on parking on 3rd Street. This figure is showing 17 parking stalls that would be affected by putting those 2 temporary turnarounds. You'd lose the diagonal parking right now that's on the south side, as well as some of the parallel parking that's on the south and north sides. When you add the rest of the street going to the west, you gain about another 4 stalls. So there's a total of around 21 stalls on 3rd Street for parking. And one of the things I just wanted to mention here, this is showing the parallel parking on the north side. There has been some recent discussions of, parallel parking versus diagonal parking, and we can answer any of those questions that come up in the question and answer stage. So Concept B looked at making 3rd Street a one-way street and restricting vehicle loadings. The city did restrict vehicle loadings on 4th Street prior to replacing it, and that gave some additional life to that street. We would look at doing that here with Concept B. We're showing diagonal parking along the north side of the road, and there's around 20 stalls. So of the 21 that exist on 3rd Street, this concept provides 20 spaces. There would not be parking allowed on the south side based on it being a one-way. Some of the other comments, I know in our walking tour, people had talked about how trying to pull out of 3rd Street onto Broadway can be difficult at times, especially with vehicles parking on the north and south side. And so this would keep vehicles moving westerly on 3rd Street. As I mentioned previously, this has a shorter life than Concept A. The county has been inspecting these bridges for the city, and they've kind of mentioned a 5-year time frame that they felt the city should be making some decisions on what they're going to be doing. Some of the improvements that would be made here with Concept B, with drainage improvements, curb and gutter, and getting water away from the bridge, because that's kind of what's been causing a lot of the issues. We feel you could add another 5 years onto that life if Mother Nature kind of cooperates. And it could last longer if Mother Nature really cooperates. But once again, Concept A...
But if Mother Nature doesn't really cooperate?
Well, like in 2014, Mother Nature didn't cooperate well with us. And so if you have events like that have never happened for quite a while here in the Carver area, that could cause some issues with just the existing deterioration on the bridge. There is a risk. Right now, that culvert is there's a sufficiency rating that we talk more about in our report, but part of that sufficiency rating is a number that they put on the culvert itself. And so the risk that I think with this option that the council and the public should be aware of is if you get to a point on future inspections, the benefit between 2015 and 2016 is it stayed the same for a rating, so that was a good note. But if the culvert itself has a deficiency, it's one number away from saying that, well, you're going to have to close the bridge to vehicle traffic. So if it can stay like that for a while, but that is the risk with Concept B, is that you do these improvements, you gain or you equal the amount of parking that you have on the original street, but you do take a risk that at some point in time you might have to close the street and then do something because of that bridge.
Wait, sorry, I wanted to ask a question about that last picture.
Sure.
Go back, please. Is the 20 parking spaces are only on the north side of the street?
Correct.
Why couldn't we still have those, sorry, guys. Why couldn't we still have those diagonal parking spots on the south side that are just right by Harvey's?
So part of removing some of those spots, and you can see here, we're making this sidewalk area wider, both on the north and south side. So, there's an existing ramp that goes up to the business, and so if you narrowed it up to try to get diagonal parking, you wouldn't have as big of an area that could be used for other types of uses. So it is something that definitely could be incorporated into the final plans if the council decides. With this option, with the option concept A, because of the turnaround, that we can't really have any parking right in that area.
Right, I wasn't talking about concept A, but my question was, when you're talking about if Mother Nature is good to us, you're talking about if Spring Creek floods? Is that what you're talking about? What are you talking about exactly?
Well, no, I was talking about more some of the events that we had in 2014, where we had that large storm that washed out part of our levee. Because, So this is more fun to talk about. The proposed improvements on Broadway. This is a street view looking up from 4th Street and looking to the north. And the city had went through a process looking at various areas in downtown Carver in their master downtown plan. So one of the areas was this stretch of Broadway from 4th Street to 6th Street. And so that has been incorporated into this study. What we're showing on this view, and you can see a little bit better on some of the upcoming slides, is diagonal parking on both sides of the street going from 4th to 5th. Right now there's only diagonal parking on the east side or the right side on this view, and there's parallel parking on the west side. Once you get north of 5th Street, then the road would be narrowing down to the existing widths, and we'd go with just parallel parking on both sides. The streetscape improvements that we talked about briefly on a previous slide are the bump outs, some street lights, scored concrete walks similar to what you have on the 2 blocks of Broadway from 4th to Main Street. Some trees, and we are showing a clock here. That's been something that has been discussed, and that clock could be relocated to either side depending on some final thoughts. Here's a plan view looking down on Broadway from 4th to 6th, and you can see, the 1 block of diagonal parking, and then the parallel parking to the north of that. The width of the walk won't be quite as wide as the first 2 blocks of Broadway. So there's where the widths get usually less than 8 feet. We wouldn't plan on putting any trees and tree grates, but where it is wider, you could put some trees in there as shown on this drawing, and you maybe can put some trees because of the right-of-way and the angle of the road. You could put a few trees behind the walk in a few areas.
Say, Dan, got a question about that.
Sure.
How many parking spots are we gaining diagonal parking than what we have right now?
Yeah, I think right now it seems like for every like 3 or 4 diagonal, you end up having 2. So you gain about 3 stalls when you go diagonal parking versus parallel. I know, and a laser doesn't work here. I don't know, Vicky, if I can't move a mouse around, but okay. So in general, and the angle parking on the north side kind of stops approximately where the historic house is on the, I should say, the right side or west or east side here.
On Glenn to point.
No, that's okay. So, I mean, we haven't added up how many more parking stalls that we could get with the diagonal parking here, but in general, it's 2 or 3 for every 2 parallel stalls. So we could get that information maybe while you're getting some questions from, I could add it up and give you a number. But it definitely does get you some more stalls with this diagonal parking. This is just a view from various looks of these proposed improvements, going from, in general, from 4th up to 6th, and then one looking from 6th down to 4th. And this, we wanted to bring up, there are some homes that are right at the existing walk, and they do have steps that encroach. It's hard to see on this drawing, but I think there's a minimum distance of around like 5.2 feet from the step itself to the back of the curb. And so definitely in some of those areas you wouldn't be putting trees, because you want to keep around generally a minimum of 4 feet in an area so that you can get wheelchairs, et cetera, by some of these areas that encroach on the sidewalk. Some of the other specific improvements on the streets on 3rd Street from Jorgensen to Ash, that is approximately 32 feet right now. It kind of narrows up as you get to the intersections, but we would reconstruct that as a consistent 32-foot width and replace existing walks. On 3rd Street from Ash to Hickory, there's discussions in the walkthrough about, there's parking on one side but not on the other side, and there does appear to be room at the feasibility stage that we feel we can get some additional width on the south side, so we would widen that street to 32 feet and extend the walk. It kind of stops short of Hickory. We would extend the walk up to Hickory on that stretch. The very west end, we would plan on putting a small turnaround at the end, but there is restrictions on grades and slopes that will limit how big that turnaround can be. And finally, Ash, Hickory, Jorgensen, and 5th will be around 24 to 28 feet in width. Generally north of 3rd Street, it's the 24-foot width. South of 3rd Street, tying into Main Street, it's the 28 feet width. The opinion of probable costs are listed here on this table, and you can see between Concept A and Concept B, it's around $2 million and $20,000 to $25,000 for these proposed improvements. This preliminary assessment role, and the city does a special benefit analysis, and I know some of the property owners here have been part of other projects in the past, and they maybe remember some of that discussion, but in general, the city did it at the end of the project, right before the assessment hearing, but we knew with the improvements proposed on these streets that it was going to get close to some of the statute limitations for assessment, so staff recommended that be done at this stage, and so a special benefit analysis has been done. It provided similar findings to what we've seen on the past 2 or 3 projects that the city has done, the Interceptor, 4th Street, and the 2015 street improvements. It looks at both single-family and commercial properties when it's giving the analysis to staff. So basically, there is an assessment for single-family homes that ranges from $4,000 to $8,000, and there's also, with the proposed alley improvements, an alley assessment of $1,200 per property that is adjacent to the alley. So if you're a house that's on a corner lot that had a street that was improved previously, that's where they would get a $4,000 assessment. If you're a corner lot or a house that's not on a corner that has improvements on 2 streets or the street right in front of you, that would be the $8,000 number. Some of the other properties I've listed on this table, it's also included in the feasibility study, but there are various commercial properties that are along the corridor. One single family there that had a $5,000 amount in their corner lot. But in general, there's a process that the appraiser goes through when giving the recommendations on commercial property, and those are reflected here. So the schedule on the project is, we're having the public hearing tonight, and so once the council gets feedback from the public on the proposed improvements, then you'll close the hearing and then discuss it and decide if you want us to proceed. If you do, there's resolutions related to ordering plans and specifications. We do have a proposed tighter schedule in bringing those plans back in mid-April to the council, opening the bids around May 11th, and then awarding the project at your May 15th council meeting. We'd anticipate construction would begin in June, and the assessment hearing would be in August. We'd complete construction, the major construction, in November of this year, and there still always is the final lift of bituminous and some restoration work that would continue to linger into spring 2018. And we know with Steamboat Days and some of the other celebrations that there'd have to be certain areas of the project, especially the Broadway stretch, that we'd put as the priority for a contractor to start on first, so that that's completed at that time. And these, I put in just some typical questions that we get from at these meetings or other meetings, but access to homes, in general, the contractor will provide access at the end of every day, but there'll be a certain time, usually around 7 o'clock in the morning, where they'll start their work. And if they're working on your street, our inspector will work with notifying people that, the contractor is going to be there. You're going to need to get out of your driveway because there will be some issues after that start time. Also, when they're laying some concrete curb and gutter and driveway aprons or concrete sidewalk, there is that week of time after it's been poured until tests come back that the concrete is strong enough before people can actually drive on it. So there's also that delay once you actually get to curb and gutter and concrete work. Usually garbage and mail delivery, we work with the garbage company and the post office on how to sort through that. A lot of times when it's garbage pickup day, we got to work with the contractor and our staff to get the garbage cans moved to a street where the garbage trucks can get, and then they'll have to roll them back to that property owners. Existing trees, the city has always kind of followed on our reconstruction in downtown to try to save existing trees. If you remember on 4th Street, there were some trees that encroached into the street that had to go. On Oak Street, we had to remove some. But in general, if the property owner wants that tree saved, we'll work to save it, and they'll do some hand placement of curb and gutter so that can be done. Project communications, we have a weekly project update that gets posted, and I think, does it get emailed, Vicki, out also to people that are on that people can sign up to have an email update. We also will work with property owners on, especially when we're working on your street, our on-site inspector will have direct communications with people to keep them informed on what's going on. And once again, the assessment hearing is proposed to be in August. I mean, that's the time when the council actually finalizes what they're going to charge for assessments. That's where the interest rate is determined. Usually it's over a 10-year period, and then it gets put on people's property assessments in 2018. So I think having some feedback from property owners on that tonight is good for the council and staff, but the actual final assessment hearing is where those final decisions are made. And then I think this would be a good time to open up to questions from the public.
So let's do this in an orderly manner. I'd appreciate it if anybody has any questions, if you could please come up to the microphone. Give us your name and your address. Come on up. Mr. D, tell him, sir. Hi, Peter.
I'm Detail, and my son and I, we own 3 properties on this project. What I'd like to know is What is the special benefit analysis done by an appraiser? Where's our special benefits for this?
Mr. Boym, I think you should explain that.
Yeah, so what an appraiser does is they look at, and they have various projects that they look at where they look at a price of a home before a project was done and then sale prices after a project is done. And so they use that information to give the feedback in the special benefit analysis.
Well, I'll tell you what, to get another $12,000 out of that house, I think you're full of shit.
And you're saying on one house, 12,000 or?
Well, we got 8,000 and 1,200.
Sure.
That's $9,200. Where do you get $9,200 value out of the same house? With your super duper appraiser. You tell me that, and don't lie to me. Don't come with a cuz answer either.
No, I don't want to do that. But yeah, in general, they, and I apologize for using that.
No, you're going back the same track you were on.
No. So, yeah, they look at a value of a home, and the city isn't allowed to assess more than what the benefit is to a project. So the city uses the information that this appraiser provides. It's not an appraisal.
It's an independent appraiser.
Right. It's not an appraisal on that specific parcel. It's an appraisal on the project as a whole. And so that's what is used. And the city's been using that, I think, on some of the past projects that affected some of your properties too.
What's a process that we've followed the entire time? And legally, we cannot apply an assessment to any property that we can't, and you can fight it. I mean, that's the nature of the beast. But the reality is, A, we try to keep it as low as possible, and B, we can't legally assess any amount to a homeowner that we can't show has been proven in value. So
That's where I'm coming from. Where can you show me that that increases that value that much?
we have it all documented
Yeah, on by whom and by what?
by an
By
independent.
yourself, by you guys.
No, no,
That's
no,
where
no.
you're going.
No, I
How
appreciate
you
that.
take real market value of that place?
I mean, and we can't, I mean, listen, what we do is we go in and we actually have an independent assessor come out, take a look at the entire project, and they break it up based upon feet of property. It's not your individual house. They don't take individual
Oh, I know
properties
that.
into affiliation. And listen, nobody's happy about assessing anybody, but these are projects that we absolutely have to do, and we try to make it as economical as possible, which is why we use an independent. There's other cities that actually assess 50 to 60% of a project, and we won't do that. I'm not trying to make you feel lucky.
Yeah, I don't know.
And I think that's a good point the mayor makes. It is closer to around that 20% that is actually being assessed on this project based on the information at this time. So that means 80% of the costs are paid for by the city through other funds.
No, I'm not real crazy about it, I'll tell you that. I can't visualize that property being that $9,000 worth $9,000 more. That's where I'm coming from.
We're picking up what you're laying down.
What's that?
We're picking up what you're laying down.
And one other thing, I know the city has looked at assessing in the past around a 40% cost to property owners based on a parcel and front foot basis. And so if we did that, we would end up having higher costs than what the special benefit analysis has shown. And so in the past, if some people are here remember from past assessment the public hearings, not the assessment hearing, but we always showed that higher cost, and we said, well, we'll do this special benefit analysis prior to the assessment hearing to let you know where things are at, because as the mayor mentioned, we can't assess more than what the benefit is. And our 40% has, in the last several projects, been higher, and so we always have to reduce it down higher. We felt on this assessment hearing, rather than showing you this number that might be at like 12 or 14,000, that we do the special benefit analysis up front so that people knew, okay, here's an independent appraiser, here's what they came up with, and try not to shock everyone with those other costs.
And we've routinely done, we can, I think, legally go up to 50 or 60%. I can't remember the number, but we've never done that. We've always kept it right around 20 to 25. Because it's hard to show the value. If I came to you and told you that we're going to increase the value of your property by $25,000, we have a big fight on our hands.
But you got one now already.
I know, I'm aware of that. Legally, we could probably do it, but we don't want to do that. And we also believe that because the city is growing, that as the funds come in, we have 20% that is going to each individual property owner. That 80% is then broken up amongst a number of different people between adding money into the general fund as new residents come into play. So we've always tried to be as equitable as we can with that. And I know that you're not going to be happy.
We got another question too, on that City Hall deal. What were you basing that, well, that basically $380 or $88, are you basing that on the houses that are here or on your anticipated growth?
That's a whole nother conversation that we'd be happy to have coming up, but this one is really directed towards this improvement project. But
I'll corner you someplace.
I know you will. You know where I live.
All right, maybe somebody else has got something here too.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. D-Town. Come on up, Mrs. Stone.
Jenny Stone, Hilldale. I just have a concern about the bridge. I'm concerned it was built in 1912, so it's 105 years old, and it's rated at a 56, if I'm correct. And at 50, it's no longer usable. And given a linear decline, that means we have less than 11 years left on that bridge. Now, to replace that bridge is at about $750,000, with the state probably picking up 80% of it. And if we were to do it now, that would be less than 10% cost of this entire project. So I'm curious about why we aren't doing it now versus kicking the can down the road and having to rip up the street again in less than 10 years.
I would love to address that, actually, because
Yeah.
if it were that simple, I don't think anybody on this council would be disagreeing with you. The reality is that the process, is not that easy. It's a 2-year process, and the $750 for the bridge itself does not take into consideration the engineering costs and everything that goes along with it. And the other part of that is the reality of funding for bridges and transportation right now is, I would venture to say that we would not get funded. We would end up, if we made that decision right now and said, let's build that bridge, we would end up funding 100% of it. And I don't know that that's an option at this point.
And I thought that there weren't even any bridge bonding funds available.
There aren't.
Correct. And just a clarification on that 50%, there's, when a bridge gets to 50% sufficiency, it's eligible for federal money, but you don't actually close the bridge down unless there's some safety issue. It just makes it eligible for federal
So
money.
we would be eligible, and it's already at 56, right? So at 50, we're eligible.
For federal money, you can...
Right, for federal.
Right.
So we're really close to, I just don't understand why we're going to rip up the street again in less than 10 years.
I'm not necessarily for ripping it up. I'm not for, if we close it now, we have a minimum 20-year life on that bridge.
Do we have that, 20 years? Because just from some random engineering calculations, I say 11.75 years.
Approximately.
So I just give or take, considering some water issues. I'm just concerned that if we don't address it now, and
We're passing it along.
Talked about, given Mother Nature, are we ripping it up in 5 years? Are we ripping it up in 10 years? And then it costs us more because it's going to be more expensive in 5 or 10 years.
Unless in 5 or 10 years, we actually can get some funding either through the state or through the feds.
Okay.
Then it's less expensive.
Dan, I have a question. If we were to go with the closing of the bridge with the turnarounds and just having the trail across, what do you think is the lifespan then at that point?
So it's probably another 10 years. It's like double the lifespan of what your concept B was. So it's hard to say. We just know that concept A is going to last longer than concept B, And if there is an issue, that's the other thing that our structural guys said, if there is an issue with the wing walls, because you're not driving across it with concept A, you could do some kind of fix on those wing walls or do some grading fix and still keep the pedestrian traffic going across that culvert.
So then I have another question with the 30-foot easement that we're missing for the turnarounds, I believe, with the concept A for like fire trucks and turnarounds. We do have to get some specialist easements because it's actually not, you can't turn around in it.
No, so it'll be like around a 60-foot diameter turnaround, and your typical diameter turnaround is a 90-foot diameter. So a large truck would have to make, more than one turning motion. We're on some of your like new developments where you have the 90-foot radius cul-de-sac. A bus and et cetera can go all the way around in one motion. Where here, I mean, even a car can almost make it on a 60-foot, but on a truck that might be delivering something, they're going to have to make a motion in that cul-de-sac, and that's why no parking would be allowed.
May I just add one thing that the one thing, while in simplicity, I totally agree with you on the bridge and the options. There is and we've talked about this, the fact that we have 3 bridges within a 1-block span, there is a very good chance that the feds would say you've got enough and they wouldn't fund this moving forward. So that is also something to take into consideration.
I just don't want it to cost us more
Agreed.
because we didn't want to take on the money now and then
Agreed.
it ends up costing us double 10 years from now.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Come on up.
Hi, I'm Tammy Reed, and I live at 300 Main Street West. Could we go back to just one slide before
Sure.
this? One more. It said it gave Ash Street, there were the side streets that said they'd be expanded to 28 feet.
Okay, sure, we'll go back.
That one, I'm sorry.
There you go.
So when I was actually reading the more detailed documentation online that was posted on Friday, it said Ash Street from 4th to 3rd was 24 feet wide, and it would remain 24 feet wide, but from Main to 3rd, it would be expanded. And I'm just wondering if you're looking for consistent width, why you would make that 1 block wider?
Sure, and when we say consistent with, we maybe mean within that block, because there's some blocks where it might be, 23 feet here, 22 feet, 24, so we'll make it a consistent width. But I think just the nature of the slopes that we have on Ash Street and Jorgensen going north of 3rd, if we start trying to widen that to 28 feet, we'd start having issues with needing retaining walls, et cetera, where on the stretch from 3rd to Main Street, we don't need that width, or we wouldn't need retaining walls, so it's easier to get a 28-foot width.
Okay, and then would the streets that are expanded, are you taking equal size from both, or are you assessing which land is more feasible? Because I know some of my neighbors, you are going to be encroaching on their dinner table. It's going to be pretty tight.
Yeah, so we would try to be consistent with some of the existing streets might not be constructed in the center of the right-of-way, so we'll look at that to try to, especially when a situation, if you have a driveway or you use it for parking, if we all of a sudden encroach on one side and it makes that person's driveway not able to park in, we don't want to do that. So we'll, in the final design stages where we'll kind of lay that out, and we can give some more updates to some of the specific property owners on some of those streets so they know how that width is looking.
Okay, and then just to reiterate, I think you and I have already touched base. I'm going to be reconstructing my driveway from 3 stalls to 2 stalls, and I want to work with the city so our timing lines up, so neither of us are left kind of in a lurch with bad construction.
Appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Come on up. Boy, he beat you.
Dan Robb. How does
Address.
appraisals work?
Address.
What's that?
Address.
505 Broadway, 421 Broadway.
Thank you.
How does the assessments work residential compared to commercial? Because right now, we're looking at 40 grand on my part. And the total fee is 385 from the public, am I right?
Yeah, I mean, the total amount, right. So I could go back to that slide.
And then another one on the slide that you showed when Glenn was asking a question in regards to parking, as far as diagonal, in front of our 421 building, you have that all diagonal parking. Well, there's 2 commercial garage doors that face the street there, where parking will not take place there. There's the 421, there's a garage door where, yeah, you're only gonna get a space or 2 there, as
Right.
far as you're gonna get.
And
That's answering Glenn's question.
correct, yeah. I mean, there are some spots where we showed, like, I think there is one spot as you go to your next building to the north where they showed a vehicle, and I said, yeah.
I can walk
but
up there.
You're talking more on the diagonal, but I think in general, right, we'll have to adjust this based on some of the,
This is overhead door and this is overhead door.
sure. So we'd have to, and that, right now there isn't diagonal on that side, so we would have to make adjustments for garages. If you go further to the north too, I think there's a car at least shown in an area where there's a garage door. And I told the, my architects that, I should have explained that when I was showing this, that, you know, we're going to have to make some adjustments here. They've tried to, because we aren't in the design, they tried to just give a visualization, and correct, there would have to be some adjustments, Dan.
And as far as assessments go, how does that affect commercial versus residential?
Yeah, commercial, and I'm not an appraiser, but I just know even when we were doing 4th Street by City Hall, the City Hall had an assessment that was like, I think 30,000 or 35,000 on that. And how they do it, there's a process they go through. I think, is one of your facilities has some living quarters in?
Yep, one of
Yeah.
them has 2 living quarters.
So I think they look at 2 living quarters, and it's, as soon as you have 2 living quarters, it's not like 8,000 each, it's something less than that. Plus they look at the commercial storage use, and so there's formulas that they,
It's more than that.
or what was that?
Well, one building's 18,000, the other one's 20.
Right, so I think,
21,000.
so like the one that has the 2 units, there's some amount related to those 2 units that they've put into the special benefit analysis, plus the storage. Is there storage in that?
There is, but I'm with Tommy on this because there's no way it's going to increase the value of those properties. I mean, at all. I mean,
No,
in
and
my mind.
And I hear what, especially on the commercial properties, what they're saying, and I think those are all good points, and we can, talk with people who kind of worked on the special benefit to get maybe a little more description. But I know, yeah, commercial properties just tend to be higher than the single-family properties when it comes to an appraisal, and I think they would have some of the background information of how they've come up with that based on
We will get
sales
that.
before and after.
Is there going to be final plans of like where sidewalks are going to be and such that, are our sidewalks going to be torn out? Is there new ones going to be put in? Or,
There'll be no skateboarding or biking.
I know that. We get them in the office door.
Right, there will be final plans that we could maybe have an open house or something on, or talk
I
directly
would
with you,
like that.
Dan.
I would like to see exactly
can-
what's going to be happening up on that there.
Because I know that you have that sidewalk right next to your building.
Right.
That's up higher, and
Right where the skateboarders, when we open the office door, we get them.
yeah, and then they jump over that
There's a
landscape
sign.
rock that you have around the corner. So I know the walk that's being shown here is around 6 feet, but it's actually from where your steps.
So it's
and-
down on the street level.
Right. So we show you still have those 2 trees there. I think we'd try to, if those are trees that you want to say, we try to leave those if we can. It might mean that there might need to be some type of wall right in that area. But in general, it was 6 feet right in that area by your building.
Is there any way to get information on how the assessment was created on our property?
Yes.
Could I get that?
Yep. And thank you for bringing that up. That actually, and that's part of the process of having these hearings and having the public if there's no questions on the assessment, no, we wouldn't bring anybody in, but now that we know, we absolutely will bring in
I'd like to know how it was assessed.
it makes sense.
And once again, this isn't the final, but I mean,
Right.
a good question, because
Yep.
that's what we're showing the people, these preliminary assessments, and there could be some adjustments made. We like to have our costs, engineering costs, come in for estimates and project costs less than what was shown in a feasibility, and that helps the overall cost too.
When throughout this process, we want to be as transparent as possible so that
Oh, yeah, I wanna
we get
know.
everything all taken care of so that you have the answers. And that certainly does not mean that we're going to agree all the time, but at least you'll have the information that we used, or excuse me, they used, that we have to judge upon, so.
All right, thank you.
You had your hand up. There you go. Nope, there you go. Come on up. There we go. Mr. Niemela.
I'm Harry Niemela. I own the apartment building on the corner there. And how much is my assessment going to be on my property there? And it ain't a lot, it's part of the lot, the building there. I think around $20,000.
Yeah, 19.
I've got approximately 56 feet of building on that street. Oh, it's a little less than I thought, but probably by the time interest and everything gets in there, I've just kind of figured around 20,000 after everything's said and done. The deal is this: you take that and you divide that over 10 years, and you divide that then over the 12 months that my tenants are there. It's going to raise their rent by $30 to maybe $40 a month if they're going to, if we'd pass that on to them. Our situation is this. We're having a hard time right now keeping the 2 small units filled, and that's quite a bit of money to pass on to tenants or try to, justify that, because the market's pretty tough out there. Another $30 or $40 a month takes us right out of the market. So I don't see the benefit in it, and the lot, we have a lot there, but I don't see a whole lot of homes being built downtown Carver, the empty space in there. So, I don't see a whole lot. I hope the other thing, too, that you consider on this, if it does pass, is that rather than narrow or widening the sidewalk like we have on the building, I don't know which direction it is, but, the new improvement that Henches put in, they added about 16 inches or 24 inches, something like that, on that edge, and took our parking away from the sidewalk there. And I didn't like that. They did do exposed stone. I thought that was nice. I'm not very happy with the regular concrete that's out in front of the apartment building there that the city did, because I understand it was going to be exposed, which would have went with the building and would have went with the existing sidewalks. But it doesn't. It looks kind of like a shopping mall entrance or something. I think that the sidewalk is, if you do this and you go up the street there, it can't be widened any. I think you need to take into consideration how much room you're going to have on that street for this parallel parking. And it's just, my concern is the market. And we can only go to a certain amount on our rent, and this is going to hurt us. We're going to be paying for it. So,
Thank you.
Get the gallon
Hey,
back.
come on in. Sorry, Daryl, you can be next.
My name is Carol Hansen, and I'm on 221 West 3rd Street. And I guess my concern is we have that parking spot out in our spot. Mrs. Monroe's aware of it. And if you put a curbing in there, are we going to be able to drive over that to park in that area? And is that factored in the assessment?
Yeah, if there's a parking area that you use, what we do with curb and gutter is at driveways or at areas where you may be pulling off, we drop the curb down. So I don't know if you just have that one spot where you park.
It's a driveway where you go into the garage and then along our sidewalk out into the street. is like a whole separate tarred
Oh,
parking
okay.
area.
Was there an old church there
Yeah.
or something?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, it's directly across the street from 220.
Right. So I know it's something that I think we can talk with staff more too. I know in different areas, I mean, we dropped things down for curbs, but we kind of ran into that situation on 6th Street where there was a person that had, graveled, had a gravel spot right next to the curb where they parked, and just, what's the final look that the city wants of the improvements when they're done. In that situation, we ended up, helping with the driveway construction and eliminated that parking right off the backside of the curb. So here, I think it's something that we'd have to review with the property owner.
So what I heard from all of that is that we will take a look at it and do everything that we can to make
And
sure
you would
that.
let us know before this takes place?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
And would we have the final assessment before that, once it's decided how it's going forward?
I'm not understanding the question.
Well, I think the assessment wouldn't be until like August
Right,
or.
but I mean, if
we-
this, if you're not gonna put the curbing out there so we can continue parking, would that still property part be assessed?
Right, and I think right now it's like assessed per parcel, so it's not like looking at, a corner, or this side of the corner lot or that side of the corner lot. So, right, the property would be assessed, but you would know before, before construction starts, we'll have discussions with you and staff and as necessary, the council on that specific area. So you'll know before the assessment hearing in August what we're planning to do in that area.
So we've made a note of your concern. Dan, as the engineer, will make sure that prior to any plans coming to us, that it has been addressed with the homeowner.
And then another question I have, we're on the corner lot, so we're on Ash Street and Third Street. So what would the sidewalks be looking like on that corner property?
So we'll replace at Ash and Third the existing sidewalks. Is there, and I apologize, I know there's the stretch at Hickory that stops short of, Third Street near Hickory, the sidewalk stops short of Hickory. And I can't remember if
Yeah,
right.
and Ash had stopped short too. There's no sidewalk on the Third Street side of
Right.
their property.
So, and was that one where we thought that if we extend the sidewalk, we'll have to pull it further away from the house or move it closer to the street? So, I mean, the intent is to try to extend sidewalks to each street so that people aren't all of a sudden stopping and then they have to walk across grass. So we would look at extending that walk. And when we get through the design stage, we can talk with you on that too and show you how we're proposing.
Because it seems like once you guys widen Third Street, our property got shorter, and if you're coming in further, we're not gonna have much property out there.
Okay.
I know we have the sidewalk going down on Third Street, but that's in the inner part of the parking spot.
Okay, so you're looking on the Ash Street side of your
Well,
property? with
both
the
kind
lot.
of, because you're mentioning sidewalks, and I don't know where they're coming in.
Sure.
You will.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks,
very
Carol.
much. Mr. Swanson?
Daryl Swanson, 221 West 4th Street. We own the property, part of Lot 2 and all of Lot 3 where the bridge is going to be. And we got an assessment of 13.3, and entire Lot 3 is in the creek. 11 and a half feet of Lot 2 is easement to the city. So realistically, we got, and 15 feet of Lot 2, Harvey's got, and we've got 26 feet that can be used for, if you don't put in a bridge, and if it's all gonna be grass, or however they're gonna do it. I think the assessment is a little steep. Not, I know you have to have money to pay for this, but if I could go over to the county and say, I don't want to pay the taxes on Lot 3 anymore, and just let it go back to the county.
Daryl, can you explain which lots you own again? I'm not quite
Well,
clear which
where
ones.
the bridge, okay, go
See
back
if I
to
go to
third.
the bridge sheet.
Go to the bridge. Okay, where the creek is, where Harvey's is on that, where the white car is there, there's 15 feet of lot 2 that belongs to Harvey's, right there. Okay, and then from there, we've got 27 feet to the easement of the dike. So 27 feet, and the entire lot 3, which is where, right in the creek.
In the
Right?
creek.
No, right where the white dots are, right? No, towards you,
Right where the
Towards you,
truck,
right
yeah,
there.
right there, yeah.
The entire lot 3 is in the creek, so, I mean, $13,300 for, there's no benefit to the creek, I mean, it's unusable. And with the 11 and a half foot easement on lot 2 coming, that's unusable too, so really $13,300 is a lot of money for 27 feet.
Can we make sure to have that on the list of talking to the,
So the only place that's usable is the driveway that goes around the back, so.
So we can find out how the person who assessed that benefit
Right.
came up with that.
Right, and I think they look at, because is it your,
don't think,
well,
honestly, you know what, there's no point in speculating at this time. Let's make sure that we get answers so that, and we can speculate all day long, but I don't want to have an argument over something that may or may not be right, please.
So, well,
Thank you, Daryl. Mrs. Swanson. Normally, I'm afraid
This
of
is
Daryl.
tag
but I'm-
team, huh?
Oh, boy. Normally, I'm afraid of Daryl, but I'm more afraid of you.
Barb Swanson, my questions are on, we live at 221 West 4th Street. The commercial property is 212 Broadway. To follow up what Daryl said, none of the building, the commercial building, is on 3rd Street at all. There's no frontage on there. So it's really just our driveway. And I'm wondering about the overall streetscape. It seems we don't have any bump outs now in what, we just did that improvement a couple, 10 years ago? And so why are we bringing in bump outs now and kind of a modern look versus the historic look that we were aiming for a few years ago? This is still the historic district. And so I'm wondering why there's such a change to put the slide that shows the big circles on it.
Barb, we do have bump outs on Main Street. I have one right
Where?
next to my house, actually, where the trails come down.
On Main Street?
On
I
Main
mean, on
Street.
Broadway?
On Main Street there are, and then I guess I can't, I know there's some on
yeah,
Broadway.
I think the city talked about putting bump outs on Broadway when that was constructed. And Barb, you've got good memories. It was like around 2003, I think, when that was constructed. And at that time, the city wasn't close to 5,000 in population, and the county had a requirement saying, we don't allow bump outs on our county roads. So the city had talked about it. Then when in 2009, when the MCS Interceptor project was going through on Main Street West, because we were getting closer to 5,000 and the city asked about bump outs on Main Street West, then the county did allow us, because their theory is that they're going to turn over County Road 40 to the city in the future, and so they weren't worried about the bump outs there. So I think it's been something that the city, I mean, the reason for a bump out is that it's a shorter distance for people to walk, so people feel safer walking across that intersection. It allows you to do a few more streetscape items, but it has been something the city has talked about since 2003 when they were doing that downtown improvement.
But are there bump outs on Broadway now?
So there's none on Broadway now, but this discussion at 3rd Street, and it maybe can show up a little bit on, we are showing the bump outs on 3rd Street at Broadway, and the plan would be to put them on the other side too, on the east side of Broadway at 3rd Street. So
Wouldn't that just be reducing the street width even more by putting bump outs? And I think just changing the whole streetscape of Broadway. I said Main, I was meaning Broadway when I said that, Christie. Shouldn't use. It seems to me there's a
yeah.
square.
Right. If we go to that. Well,
All right, let's keep it one at a time.
yeah, good question. I mean, these bump outs are laid out so that, you know, a semi or a large vehicle can make the turn. So,
Well, I don't know that a semi is our main concern in downtown Carver, with all due respect.
But County Road 40 is a trunk highway
Sure.
through our city, so there are going to be big trucks.
right, and the radius is set. I know people might disagree, but you know, we have these turning templates. These engineers are really get excited about templates and turning motion. So we have certain types of vehicles, and we run this vehicle through the curve and say, yes, this vehicle can make it. Buses can make the turn. Fire trucks can make the turn. So we do set out these bump outs for vehicles to make it. And there's other cities that have put these in that have experience that we've worked with, and so we take that experience here to Carver also.
Okay, and I was just thinking bump outs aren't historic. And then a question on the alley. What is the alley, width of the alley going to be improvement?
Yeah, I think in general, the right-of-way of the alley is around 16 feet. And so the improvements would be, I think in our feasibility study, we have it being placed to that whole 15 feet. Now we'll get some survey information and can readjust that in design, but at least for cost estimating, it was based on around 16 feet.
Okay, and then have there ever been assessments on alleys in previous construction projects in the city of Carver?
Not since I've been here since 1996. We haven't actually improved alleys, so this is the first time that we're actually looking at doing alley improvements.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barb.
Thanks, Barb.
Mr. Teasfeld, sir.
Peter Teasfeld, 209 4th Street West. My question was just on the alley, too. What are you going to do, and maybe you've already gone through this, so I apologize. What are you going to do to make the alley better?
Could you please speak into the microphone so everybody can
I'm
hear you?
sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, what's the plan to make the alley better?
So we're going to put in new class 5 and bituminous on all the alleys as part of this proposal. And the council will make a decision if they want to keep with that. And then there'll be some work we anticipate. There's some growth that has been encroaching on the alleys. So in order to get maintenance equipment through on some of the alleys, we'll be working with cutting back some of that growth that is encroaching on the alley.
Mr. Skoke, maybe you'd like to touch on that. I know that you had some feelings on for maintenance issues and plowing, et cetera, for the alleys. Maybe you want to add in, maybe not.
Yeah, no, Dan is exactly right. A lot of it is just for the maintenance reasons. And when we do get heavy rain, especially on the hillsides, we're picking up a lot of those alleys, putting them back in there and really just trying to prevent that.
Okay.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Open microphone. Come on up, Harlan. Excuse me, Mr. Thamer. Thank you. You're welcome.
I'm Harlan Tamert. I live on 100 West 5th Street West. I was wondering, on 5th Street West, is there going to be curb and gutter put in there?
Yes.
Here is past my place and on Broadway. Is there going to be a sidewalk? Right now, the sidewalk ends at my house. Is there going to be a sidewalk on the left-hand side going up to 6th Street?
On your side?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
What about, I got them trees and evergreens I planted in there. If you're going to put a sidewalk in there, you're going to have to take some of the street away, or that's right. All I'm curious, if you're going to put sidewalk.
Yeah, I think, and I know when we walked that, and I know, Harlan, you were doing something, and then, but you know, I think we talked with you a little bit. There is that one tree that's, I think, closest to the street that we felt that one would have to go. If we take a tree, we can give you another tree as a, for replanting. The evergreens, I'd have to, I don't remember that we were gonna affect your evergreen, but I knew that one tree that was
That's
closest.
maple tree.
Yeah, and I know you kinda like that.
That could go
and-
too, and
or that could
that
go?
one I don't mind
Okay,
too much.
that's good.
We'll replace it, though.
But them two, where would you put the different other tree?
Just
If you're gonna
somewhere.
make the sidewalk?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I'm looking here, what we're showing by your, yeah, I think there's some areas where we can place it, you know, if we take one of your you can put it, you can give us direction on where you would want it on your property. We can work there. Cindy, or the city planner, is so quick on her Google Maps, and she shows, and I see that there's that one evergreen tree, and that's an evergreen tree that might be small enough that we could relocate that if that's an
Okay.
issue.
Well, them two evergreens are they come special.
Okay.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thamert. Daryl, come on up. Oh, I'm sorry. No, go ahead. We'll get to you.
Daryl Swanson, in regards to the alley behind 221 4th Street where it comes down, I know there's a lot of washing when it rains, but when they did the sewer and water the last time, they put a curb there that helped a lot. And there never used to be any water running down there, but the curb disappeared, so that's more or less why the water is running down. I'm just trying to figure out with that high slope, how that's gonna be fixed or maintained. I always thought it'd be a good idea to make the alley one way, and then, because people go out and they spin and throw the dirt out, and then the water can run down through there, and
I mean, I know we'll have curb and gutter on the north-south street, so, I mean, right now, it sounded like there was curb at one time, but it's
well, it was
disappeared.
blacktop curb.
Oh,
And I mean, wasn't on Ash Street up to our right away, or the street right away where they put the curb. I mean, it stood up about that high. Now it's
remember
down, you know, it was blacktop. Now it's below the street. And when it rains, the water comes to the east side and runs down. It gets down to the alley and goes down the alley. Instead of, if you put a storm sewer in there, that's gonna probably eliminate a lot of that as far as washing and stuff. But I know every time it rains, half the alley's down out in Jorgensen, so. But that was,
sure. No,
it never used to wash out like that. I mean, we've lived in the house now for 50 years, and nobody used the alley, so.
I know what you're saying, because, you know, I drove my Ford Fusion, and I wasn't pretending I was Evel Knievel, but coming up that, some people don't know who Evel Knievel is, but coming up that, it is a steeper slope coming up that.
So I was just wondering how that's gonna be encroached, because there's a garage there, you can't
Right, you can't change the grade.
change the grade either.
So I guess in general, the plan would be if we can flatten it a little bit, we try to do that, but you got to match into garages, et cetera, and so it would be to pave that so that and then improve the drainage, like you said, with curb and
On
gutter.
Ash Street, it'll eliminate a lot of the water that would run down there, so. Okay,
Dan gets excited about stuff like that. Come on up. Thank you. Sorry to...
No worries, no worries. Julie Cantock, 208 West 3rd Street. I have a couple of quick questions. What's Class 5 bituminous?
Blacktop.
Okay. Has the city at all considered the type of asphalt where water can drain in environmentally such?
Permeable.
Permeable, ooh, that's the word.
Very expensive.
So,
Yes, we've considered it.
and
And
quickly,
we
yep.
still may, but the cost is...
Astronomical, I would presume.
Prohibitive.
It's 2-3x.
It's, yeah.
Okay. What type of curbs are in the planning? Just the regular kind of curbs or the more flattened
It's
kind?
really cool curves. Sorry, I'll let Dan answer.
So generally, we call them barrier curbs. So the barrier curb has like a 6-inch height height on it, but then when we get to driveways, we lower it down and then come back up. So if you look at streets on 4th Street or Oak Street or 5th Street East and Main Street, it's all the barrier type curb.
And the plan for the alley would not be curbed, I would presume?
Correct.
Do you have the dates for those future meetings, for both the August assessment hearing and the design stage dates of those hearings or meetings?
Yeah, we haven't set the assessment hearing date. I know as far as dates to look through the design, if we go back to our schedule. And, you know, we're planning to bring the plans in April, mid-April, so we'd have to do, haven't set a date yet. It sounds like if people are wanting an open house, we'll work with staff and get one sent out, or set up and then sent out to the residents again.
So design plans in April, the assessment hearing in August.
Yeah, and we put in there August 2017. We used to wait until like October, November, and then it was very stressful because you got to get all that stuff in to the county, and so we've picked, I think the last one, we moved it up sooner because of the special benefit feedback. So when that date is set, you'll also get a notice mailed out into your, mailed out directly to all the property owners, and probably in that weekly update that we give, we'll probably give the date so that you have a few different communications telling you when it's going to be.
So the idea would be to get your email to the city, because I would imagine there'll be a email for that too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I think of the last simple question is how alleys are assessed? Is that by just straight footage? Whether or not there's access to properties or not, or straight footage?
Right, it's just
Straight footage.
It's just on actually a per parcel, so it's not like that one property has 1,200, the next one has 1,000. It's just per parcel on the alley if you have that. And there's 2 properties that are less than that. There's on the stretch from Jorgensen to Spring Creek. There's 2 properties that the appraiser said, well, there's just like one, there's no house on it, and so those were like $300 and $600. But in general, it's if you live on the alley, it's a $1,200 assessment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Come on up, Mr. Niemela. I would like to talk to you afterwards about the market itself.
Yeah, I just have some concern maybe about the bump outs. You know,
Bump outs.
the bump outs, because you're cutting those corners pretty tight where you're putting them in. I don't think a semi can hardly make those turns unless he goes over in the other lane before he comes into the alley or into the intersection, and then he puts his tractor over there as far as he can. He still probably isn't going to be able to make it. So then he has to back up, then go again. So he's impeding on other traffic. That's not a very safe issue. And so that's my concern. I think it should be yours too.
Thank you. Does he have anything he'd like to add? Normally, he comes up and talks and takes over the meeting, and I just want to make sure that we give him the opportunity. He's thinking he will. You want anything you want to add?
Come on up.
You were just. We get that a lot. Good to see you, bud. Anybody have anything else they'd like to add or question? Thank you all. Mr. Holder, nothing? All right. So do we, just for procedural purposes, do we need to close the public meeting to have a discussion? Pardon? What did I say? Public meeting? Thank you.
I'll make a motion that we close the public hearing.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. All right. Discuss.
Okay, I will discuss. I guess when we're looking at the alleyways, and we did not require the previous downtown improvements to pay for the assessment to have their alleys done, and now we've chosen to take a look at this part of the city doing the alleyways. So we'll have some done, some not. So I'm having a hard time tacking another $1,200 fee onto the assessment that they're already going to be getting for the rest of the street improvements. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around if the real benefit of the $1,200 for paving those alleyways. And then how do we go back in the future and look at the other alleyways that we didn't assess for? When we're talking about...
Sorry, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding. Have we ever paved alleyways?
No.
Okay. Thanks, buddy. Bye-bye.
So when we were talking about, Brian Skoke, maybe I can get your attention. So we were talking about things that it was impeding. Are you saying that the alleyway is becoming smaller or becoming larger? So you're having a harder time getting in because the grass, I guess you're going to say, is growing into it?
Yeah, it's grass and trees and that have encroached on it. We also have, garages and stuff that we'll have to tend with, but with our equipment and stuff, it is getting harder to get in there.
So I guess for me, it's not a curb and a gutter that you're driving over. I mean, you're driving over grass, so it's not a large impediment. It's not like you're having to drive over concrete barriers and things like that.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
While I understand what you're saying about the alleys on the west side of town have some pretty major slopage to them. And if we just keep putting down rock, it just washes into the road. So, I mean, I think we really do need to tar them.
I agree with you, and the reason that I agree with you isn't necessarily, I think we are making a commitment to downtown, and we have over the course of the last probably 15 to 20 years. And I think paving the alleys is extremely important just for A, aesthetics, B, logic, and C, maintenance. I mean, I think at some point the option would be is that we don't plow or maintain alleys. I don't think that's an option.
I want to go back to the Concept A and Concept B plans for the bridge area on 3rd Street. I am having a very hard time losing that many parking spots with the
Agreed.
Concept A plan.
Agreed.
And as far as the bump outs, maybe they don't have to bump out so far because I think we also lose parking by having bump outs, don't we?
Right, there's, trying to, if I can go back to,
Don't we potentially increase the visibility on those corners too, though?
right. I know, where we show the bump outs on the south side of 4th Street, I mean, we knew that, you just restriped that. I mean, in general,
What, Dan?
In general?
Did
I'm
you
trying to avoid saying, because, sometimes people say basically, some people say in general, I end up repeating in general, so I'm trying to avoid that. But you can see right at this corner by City Hall where we're stopping the bump out, still creating that bump out, that visibility for crossing, but stopping it so that you aren't losing spots. I don't know if you're losing too much now because you stay a certain distance away from a crosswalk, and on the other side, there's the driveway for the post office, so you have to stop it short there. But what we can do for the council and staff is put those turning radiuses on. I mean, those are average turning movements that a vehicle makes. Some people might turn differently than the next person, but just to give people some comfort level that, the width of the bump out, between the crosswalk has to be a certain distance, and the radius so that vehicles can turn and make that movement.
So for me, you know what, I apologize. Were you done?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
For the moment.
I got more. I am not concerned about losing the parking. What I'm concerned about, let me rephrase that. I'm concerned about losing the parking. That isn't my main concern. We've talked to the business owner that is right at that, and she is actually in preference of option A.
Which business owner is that?
Harvey's. And one of the things that I think...
That's not true. I mean, that's not how it was portrayed
What's that?
to me.
She likes option B? Oh, I was sorry. I was told. Okay. I was told that she likes option A. So anyway, so I'm still in favor of option A for the reason, not necessarily parking, but we are going to have an issue with erosion. We are going to have an issue with that bridge itself. And we are not going to be able to afford it in 5 to 10 years. And there will not, in my opinion, be federal money available or state money available for the sheer reason that we have 3 bridges within a 1-block area. They are not going to fund that bridge. So, I mean, for me personally, if we're prepared to come up with $1 million, well, $1 million plus 5% every year, because it would be, how much would it cost for us to buy that bridge right now and redo it?
I think the estimate in the report was in that 750 or 60,000.
Okay. So plus 5% a year for 10 years, 11 years, whatever it might be. The city's going to have to come up with that because we're not going to get it. Again, this is just one man's opinion. We are not going to get state or federal funds because they're not going to build another bridge to move people 1 block.
And who told you that?
Just my experience with working with SHPO and working with the feds and the Army Corps of Engineer, going through the process. How long did it take to get, what was the first suggestion to go over Main Street for a bridge?
I don't recall.
It was to build a bridge over it because of
SHPO.
historic, right. And then we didn't get the funding right away. And the reality is, and I don't want to pass that on to the next council. And while I agree that parking is important, $1 million down the road is not a great deal.
I would consider doing the one-way on 3rd Street, maybe not even doing any improvements along there at this point, while we go out and investigate funding a bridge and see when funds are going to be available and whether or not we will qualify for them.
That was, oh, can I?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's related to the bridge, so that was going to be my question. Dan, is it something that we can kind of put in an application or kind of get the ball rolling so that we have our foot in the door with that process? Or can you explain more of how that process works with the state?
And is there a cost to that?
Yeah, so in order to get on the funding list with the state, you have to have a set of plans prepared and then submitted and reviewed. And part of that process, if depending on what you were going to do with the bridge, if you're going to remove and replace it, then you also have to go through that process with SHPO, where you've got to do almost like a study, as I think some of the council members mentioned in the past. You had to study, well, what could you do to the bridge to save it rather than remove and replace it? And because there's no history of the drawings of when that bridge was built, SHPO has allowed the city on the 4th Street Bridge and the Main Street Bridge to remove and replace. But it still is a process, and yeah, there are costs associated with preparing that study for SHPO that goes to also the Corps, and then preparing the plans and for a bridge to sit there and possibly get funding. We were very lucky on the Main Street Bridge and the 4th Street Bridge that funding was sitting there, and they were looking for projects to fund. And at this time, there is no funding, and depending on how the state legislature does things this year, we don't know if there's funding for bridges.
What was the cost difference, Dan, between concept A and concept B?
$4,000.
Yeah, because we're putting in
47.
We're putting in curb and gutter on, concept A with the cul-de-sacs, right? I can go to that chart. One is 35, the other 30,000. So there's not a big difference in the two options.
Well, I have talked, whoa, hello. I have talked to a couple of homeowners in that area who have actually preferred, is B the one with the turnarounds? Or is that A?
That's
A.
That's
Sorry. A. So they prefer option A with the turnarounds. So I think we should maybe take that into consideration too, that there is some on the other side of the fence who are in favor of that as well. And then another comment I wanted to take a look at, if we are looking at the angled parking, turning it to one-way and angled, is there a reason that we might not look at doing one-way and parallel? You'll keep headlights out of people's living rooms. And you still have, Dan, how many parking spots have we counted there? 12?
Yeah, I think there's 12 on the north side right now with parallel parking. I think we had 21 total on the street and then 17 that are affected by the Concept A.
And for that bump out where now they're parking parallel, or excuse me, angled, with that bump out, this is far outside the box, but if we can look in the future, maybe that is outside seating for Harvey's. I mean, look at Water Street and Excelsior. People like to sit and be seen, so maybe it won't be such a bad idea to have that big bump out there.
And we hope for a flood so that there's moving water. No, just kidding.
Yeah, I think that's the benefit to, I mean, with the bump out is that you do have areas where they can be used for other uses than what they currently use.
Dan, if we go with option A with the turnarounds, what, will there be parking on the west side?
There,
No parking.
There'd be parking anywhere.
there'd,
So
yeah, there'd be
the homeowners,
On
the
the
very
west
west,
side.
the very west end would have parking. I mean, it would be still the parallel parking,
Just to the west of that.
right? But in the area of the turnaround itself, and then the green area and the turnaround, actually that first stretch going to Broadway, there wouldn't be parking.
There wouldn't be.
Correct.
Just want to make sure that was clear. So, just so that I understand, what we're trying to accomplish tonight, Dan, is we need to have a motion reflecting actions taken. The first resolution is receiving the feasibility study and setting the public hearing.
Right, that's kind of a resolution that's a follow-up of the motion that you did at a previous meeting, so you should approve
This
that
one we need
first.
to approve to move forward.
Right, the first one is
This
like,
isn't depicting option A, this is just saying that this is the feasibility study that we received and we're okay with it.
Correct.
Okay. Let's get that going, if we could.
So I can make a motion to approve Resolution 107-17, reflecting actions taken at the February 6th, 2017 council meeting relating to receiving the feasibility report and setting the public hearing.
Which was tonight. Yes.
I'll second that.
There is a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on that? There's a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Do we have any further discussion on directing city engineer to prepare plans and specifications on the project? So as I see it, the one thing that we do need to specify to the engineer, and please, again, correct me if I'm wrong, is paving the alleys, the bump outs, which is on the feasibility study already, and the choice between concept A and concept B. Am I missing anything?
Parking on Broadway?
yeah, I mean, correct, the parking on Broadway would have to.
That's
I mean,
going to work itself out.
Well, if you want diagonal parking, like we're showing on those concepts, we go there. Because we know there's some areas where we're going to have to remove the parking, but in general, diagonal parking, that first block from 4th to 5th Street, if the council's okay with that. Right now, it's diagonal on the east side and it's parallel on the west side.
So that, really, what we're looking at, concept A and B, alley and diagonal parking.
Diagonal parking up here on,
Correct.
Go for it.
I would make a motion that we approve Resolution 108-17, directing city engineer to prepare plans and specifications on this project, utilizing concept A, paving the alley and including diagonal parking north of 4th Street. There's a motion. Motion apparently dies for lack of a second. Would anyone else like to entertain a motion?
I would entertain the same motion, except instead of option A, I would say option B.
And I would second that.
There is a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Nay. We should probably do a roll call.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Henry.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Mock.
Aye.
Councilmember Monroe.
Aye.
Mayor Webb.
Nay.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Daniel, you have your marching orders.
Thank you.
Let us now move on to the consent agenda. Thank you, folks, very much. You guys are going to be bored from here on in. Not that you're super excited as we speak.
Thank you.
Could I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. No unfinished business. Dan, 2017 utility project.
Cindy's helping me here. Thank you. Well, there's our numbers. If you have any further questions, call. So part of the discussions on the projects with the streets on the 2017 street improvements was the utility improvements. And in reviewing that with the city attorney and the bond council, the decision was made that those have to be are like separate type of projects. And so we've actually dealt with the utility work as a utility report. And so the utility report incorporates work on sanitary services and water services and storm sewer work on these 5 project streets. Actually 6 because I have Jorgensen combined with Ash. At this time, Public Services is anticipating 10 sanitary sewer services would either be replaced or some new ones placed for some of the old septic tank areas in this stretch of part of town, as well as water main services. Also, storm sewer system work would be done with improvements, and because that is being, well, I'll go through those costs. The costs are estimated at $654,000, and because those are being paid for by other funds and assessments, the city may consider using utility bonds, and I think city staff is currently working with Springstead on that, as well as storm sewer and water and storm sewer funds to help pay for that $654,000. So our staff recommendation is that you'd have the city engineer prepare plans and specifications related to those 2017 utility report improvements.
I have a question. You just referenced assessments. Are we going to be assessing property owners?
No.
Okay. What did you mean then?
No, these improvements would be paid for through utility bonds or your sewer, water, storm sewer funds.
Well, you did say assessments, didn't you?
Yeah, Mayor and Council, I think one of the things, this is a little bit of a departure from your past practices. So the Chapter 429 bonds that the city uses for improvement bonds requires that a municipality use or assess 20% of the project costs to the property owners. If you add the utility portion to your regular street portion, you won't meet your 20% test.
Oh, I see.
So because let's say the project is $1 million, and you're assessing 200,000, but if you add the utilities on to that $1 million, the project, you need to assess more.
Right.
And because of the benefits test, and because obviously, folks are struggling already with the amount of their assessments, what we're doing is using this Chapter 444 bond, and since there are no assessments related to the utility work, we're basically segregating the utility work out. It'll be bid out, and the same contractor will get the work. It'll be the low bid. It's just the financing methods are different, and so it's a good question, Councilmember. It's a departure from our typical practice where it's all lumped into to one, but it's for the purposes of financing. It's built into two separate projects.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Are we discussing?
Yeah.
You asked my question.
Oh. Well, can I make a motion and then we can discuss further?
Sure.
Okay, I'll make a motion to have the city engineer proceed with plans and specifications related to 2017 utility report.
I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second. Further discussion?
All construction's going to coincide with the street repairs.
Correct.
Is
that it?
That's all I got.
All right. There's a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Moving on. Dan the man. Carver Square. Sorry, Ms. Nash.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
I apologize.
Before you this evening are two items related to Carver Square. The first is a rezoning from general commercial to general commercial with a planned commercial development overlay on it, and a site plan is incorporated as part of that resolution. And then the second resolution is approving the preliminary plat for Carver Square. What this essentially does is takes that larger outlot that was left over after the Carver dental plat and replats that into 3 additional lots, on which one of those lots is proposed to be a child care facility. They would construct, as evidenced in your plans, it shows the ultimate site plan for the whole area, but then they would only be constructing a portion of those improvements as a part of the child care facilities development at this time, and then the remaining parking improvements and associated items would be going in with the development of lots 1 and 3 whenever those happened in the future. You would still see those site plans for lots 1 and 3 whenever they are proposed. Happy to answer any questions that you have. Dave Picorni is also here, and I'm sure would be happy to.
He's playing solitaire.
Got nothing.
My only question is, this has been before the Planning Commission?
It has. And they recommended approval unanimously.
Thank you. That was my last question.
The question that I had was a portion of the site, I think it was the traffic study and the site plan review that recommended moving or adjusting the main entrance to the child care facility because of the flow of the traffic in and out of that parking lot. Is there any, I don't know, this is a question for you, if there's any consideration given to that, because I can see where that would be a little bit of a funnel.
Yeah, I can see why the traffic consultant recommended that, but also given how this property can lay out, I think it would be challenging to move that location to a different location as well. So, and maybe Dave would want to answer that as far as any deliberations they gave in that regard.
Yeah, we knew you would.
Complain about the assessments.
You've been before a few of those. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Dave Picardi, and I'm with the Community Asset Development Group and the Lenzen Group, who own the land. Yes, relative to that one, that comment, we did look at potentially turning it, but a big challenge on this site is ponding. I'm not going to get into my argument with Dan, but what's happening here, because of the downstream limitations, Um, Today, there's 13 CSF of water that leaves the site at the 10-year rain.
Cubic square feet.
Cubic feet, right. Is that it? 13 cubic feet per second. We're reducing it to less than 2. So at full development, we'll be at 90% of what the pre-development was. And that's been the challenge as it fits with the site. And if we start turning the buildings, it turns into where the ponds need to be. Now, we've solved it. City staff's been really good. We've worked through this. But that was one of the changes we couldn't make. What we have done, though, and quite frankly, I think the consultant's suggestion of going to wider parking for those stalls that are in front of the building is really a good one. Because if you go to drop kids off at daycare, everybody's opening up and closing doors, and they're all there at the same time. And so, and we have done that. We've gone now to 2 feet wider stalls for the ones that are in front of the building. We do think we're really excited about the project. I think this will be a great use. And what it'll do is it'll make the rest of the retail on the 2 remaining sites potentially work. We needed to have some kind of draw on the site. And that was, the daycare was really a high priority, and quite frankly, so is a dentist. Those are both uses that draw people in that wouldn't be coming to the site otherwise. So.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are really excited about the daycare. My only other question is there going to be any kind of outdoor play area?
Yes, so maybe it doesn't show up real good on that site, but directly to the south, there will be an enclosed play area with play apparatus. And,
okay.
And there's a park across the street.
There is a park across the street.
Safe crossing.
Right.
Those little strollers for all 6 of them. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Make a motion to adopt Resolution 105-17, approving a rezoning from general commercial to general commercial / planned commercial development and a site plan.
I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Come on, one more, you guys.
Oh, my God.
I'll make a motion to adopt resolution number 106-17, approving a preliminary plat for Carver Square.
And I will second that.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, guys, very much.
Thank you.
Monroe. Oh, Johnson.
Pass.
Mock.
Pass.
Hank.
I'll pass.
Mr. Merrick.
Just a couple items. The first being where there's an open house on Monday, March 13th from 5 to 8 p.m. on the Village Hall options. So we'll be here with staff from Leoy Daily answering questions, collecting comment cards. The second piece, some of you know that the city has initiated a discussion with the County Highway Department regarding the seal coating project that they did last summer. I've connected with Lyndon Robgent, the County Highway Engineer, last Thursday and coordinated a meeting with Brian Skoke and Mike Legg, their maintenance director, and I think they'll be meeting probably either this week or early next week to go over options. I think Brian's been working with their staff to head up some cleanup efforts related to street sweeping and getting some of that loose rock out of the boulevard areas. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Brian.
No, actually, unless there's any specific questions about the cleanup, we do have city staff kind of working with the county street sweeper in town, so we will be starting early tomorrow morning doing the Broadway, the downtown area, and we did start today on some of the side streets, trying to clean up some of those sidewalks and some of the grass area that we can.
Thank you. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.